I think the obvious storyline's there for the Bears, where there are a lot of people with a lot on the line there. They're 3-7 right now. They've got a young quarterback in the building, and the organization is going to have to make some big box decisions after this year.
Welcome to the Hurry Up. I'm Robin Lundberg here with senior writer Albert Breer. And Albert, the Giants didn't waste any time. In fact, you could say they were in a hurry to get rid of Jason Garrett as their offensive coordinator. But how much of that is sort of a scapegoat maneuver? Because when I look at the Giants, I see a team that needs everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly puts the rest of the building on notice. There's no question about that. The Mara family is very close with Jason Garrett. Garrett worked there about 20 years ago. And so the fact that they were willing to go to this length and to fire a coordinator in midseason, and for an organization that's like long prided itself on stability and not doing things like this, I think the fact that Jason Garrett winds up out in midseason, again, a guy who's that close to them and doing it at the juncture that they did it, I think puts everybody else in the building on notice. It's been 6 years since they've been in the playoffs. And I would say that the general manager, Dave Gettleman, after 4 years, the head coach, Joe Judge, after 2 years, those guys are going to be evaluated the rest of the year. Again, I think that the Maras really like the guys that they have in charge. They really like Joe Judge and some of the things that he's done over the last 2 years. They really like Dave Gettleman and how he's changed some of their scouting methods. But they just got rid of somebody they really like. And getting rid of somebody they really like in Jason Garrett, I think definitely sends the message everyone else in the building that the results they've gotten over the course of the first 10 games of this year aren't acceptable.
Well, I mean, I don't know how you could look at anybody you were just talking about and evaluate them on the positive side of things. I mean, Gettleman drafted Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley with the second overall pick in the draft. I mean, real quick, let's go through each of those guys. Do you think they are with the Giants into next season, Gettleman?
Gettleman, I would say probably not. And I think what's going to be interesting to see with that is the form this takes on. There's such a long-standing relationship there, and Gettleman's worked there and has history there going back to the 90s. So I'd be interested to see how this is handled. One of the criticisms you hear of the Giants, I mean, you've heard consistently of the Giants, is there's too many people that work there that have worked their entire careers there, and there aren't enough new ideas coming into the building. And Gettleman's sort of become emblematic of that, and a guy who came up in the Giants way, who learned the Giants way, who's won Super Bowls with the Giants. And so, the question becomes then, all right, how do we move off of Dave Gettleman? And is it a firing? Is it a retirement? Does he stay on as a consultant? So that's one piece of it. And then the second piece of it is for an organization that's always hired guys from within, that's always hired guys that they have history with, are they willing to go outside the organization and make a move and go and bring in somebody who isn't sort of connected to the family in some way? And so, I think that there's, I to some degree, it feels like a fait accompli that, it's sometime soon there's going to be a change in the general manager position. I think the more important question is going to be how that happens.
Well, what about head coach? Joe Judge obviously hasn't been there long, but the results haven't been great.
Well, they really like Joe. I mean, I will say that. And this is a guy that they obviously took a chance on. And I think they knew it was going to take some time for Joe to move in, to grow into the role of head coach, having been a special teams coordinator in New England. He wasn't really in that forward-facing of position. And so he was going to have to learn, and there was going to be a learning curve to becoming a head coach. And part of that's putting together a staff, and so now, I think that, seeing what he does with the offensive coordinator position, seeing if the offense winds up playing better over the rest of the year, I think that's going to be an important piece of this, and seeing where they go with that head coaching position. So, again, I think Joe Judge is somebody they really like, and I think they, as they see it coming into this, as they saw it coming into this year, he wasn't somebody who entered the year in a position where he was going to be fighting for his job in November. But we are where we are right now, and so. Will he survive? I think is a real question. I think he probably does wind up getting a year past this one. But then I think the next question is, if they do make a move on the general manager, what's the next move after that? Is it somebody from within who's got experience with Joe Judge? Is it somebody that's connected to Joe Judge, like, Monty Ossenfort down in Tennessee, somebody that worked with Joe over the course of his time in New England? Or is it somebody from the outside? Because those can be two really different things, Rob. And if you hire somebody who's got a connection to him, then, well, that person's now hitched to Joe, and Joe and him move forward, and there's sort of a package deal. The other way you can go is you bring in a general manager for somebody from somewhere else who doesn't have any history with the organization, doesn't have any history with Joe, And now, you go into 2022, and very clearly in that scenario, Joe would be under evaluation.
And finally, a quarterback, Daniel Jones, he shows these
Mhm.
glimpses of talent, but he's far too inconsistent, way too many turnovers. To me, he sort of looks like, a guy who could be serviceable to start at times, but more a high-end backup. Where do they go at QB?
Yeah, and I think that the question really is going to be is how fair it is to evaluate what we've seen from Daniel Jones over the first 2.5 years of his career. You've seen glimpses of why he was the sixth overall pick, the athleticism, some of the ability to make throws downfield. Like, you see why he was considered a first round talent going into the 2019 draft cycle. But the question really is going to have to be, how do you separate some of their issues in building the offensive line with Jones's performance, some of the issues they've had putting skill position players on the roster with Jones's performance, Saquon Barkley's health issues? How do you connect those to Daniel Jones? And so I think the question is going to be how you evaluate Daniel Jones. And the issue for the Giants now is they really are reaching decision time. After the third year, that's generally when we've seen teams make the long-term decision on their quarterbacks. We see how awkward it is now with Baker Mayfield in Cleveland, going into fourth year without that decision really having been made. And the real marker becomes then the decision on the fifth year option. There was a change in the way those things set up logistically last year, in that now those fifth year options, when you execute them, they're fully guaranteed. And so you can't get out of them after the fourth year anymore. And so between now and the beginning of May, the Giants are going to have to make a decision on whether or not to pull the trigger on Daniel Jones's fifth year option. And that can be usually at least a pretty good tell on where a team stands on a guy.
You said something there that piqued my curiosity, switching topics for a second, and the situation with Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns. Is that
Mhm.
one that you could see ending? I mean, where is that relationship going at this moment?
Well, I don't think the question is whether or not they're willing to pay Baker Mayfield. This is something I actually asked the general manager there, Andrew Berry, about over the summer, and he said on the record we're comfortable extending him. The question becomes, what level are they comfortable extending him at? Are they comfortable extending him at 20 million, at 30 million, at 40 million? And then the issue associated with that really is, the fact that there's not a real B level for quarterback contracts in the NFL. This has become a yes or no question. You don't see guys getting 60% of the top of the market, 70% of the top of the market more often than not, especially with guys who are drafted in the first round. It's either you give them a top of the market contract or you walk away from them. And that's really where the Browns are with Baker Mayfield now. It's, do you pay him $40 or $45 million a year? It seems like the answer to that question would be no at this point, because if they were going to give him that much, they would have gotten a deal done already. Can you convince him to take a little bit less, even though the market hasn't dictated that there's any landing spot for that sort of contract, or do you walk away from him? And then I think that where you eventually will get to after this year is, if you aren't willing to pay Baker Mayfield $40 or $45 million a year, can you find somebody you are willing to pay that much? Because you look at the Browns roster, top to bottom, it's a roster that's ready to win right now. You have guys on that roster like a Myles Garrett, like a Jarvis Landry, like a Nick Chubb, like a Denzel Ward, another guy that you're going to have to make a decision on paying, like a Jedrick Wills, like a Jack Conklin. Guys who are in the heart of the prime of their career are on that roster. This win now time for a lot of those guys. And so, if you don't think Baker Mayfield's worth paying $40 to $45 million a year, then is it time to go find somebody you are willing to pay that much at that position? And I think that is where the entry point could be for the Browns eventually, maybe getting in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes in early 2022, or in the Russell Wilson sweepstakes in early 2022, or in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes at the beginning of 2022.
Yeah, didn't think we'd get here between the Browns and Baker Mayfield after what happened there last year. Now to a positive story out of not a quarterback but a running back. We got to give the running back shine when they're doing well, because everyone's always saying they're expendable, right? Jonathan Taylor, 5 touchdowns, has been putting up huge numbers for the Colts. And I think the highest compliment you can give a running back is when people start putting them, or trying to put them, into the MVP conversation.
Yeah, and I think Jonathan Taylor certainly deserves to be there. And I think the question is sort of going to become, Robin, what did everybody miss on him? This is not like, this sort of production from Jonathan Taylor isn't new. He did this for 3 years at the University of Wisconsin, rushed for over 6,000 yards there. and how dependable he is. That's the other piece of it. I had a scout I talked to earlier today pointed this out. 8,000 yards, about 1,300 carries over the last 5 years. That covers his 3 years at Wisconsin and his 2 years with Indianapolis. Guys missed one game. Like, you talk about that sort of durability with that kind of workload. It's really, really impressive. And I think the same way Wisconsin built an offense around him, built a team around him, really, there over his 3 years in Madison. The Colts are now building what they do around him. And he's so valuable because he's allowed them to sort of ingratiate Carson Wentz into the offense a little bit, at a little bit more of a measured pace. They don't need to ask as much of Carson Wentz, and that's allowed Carson Wentz to play better. The fact that they've got a defense they can trust now. Well, you got a guy like Jonathan Taylor, you can shorten the game. You can play the game on your terms. I think Jonathan Taylor's affected that team in every way, and he matches right up with the investment that they've made on their offensive line in drafting guys like Quentin Nelson and Braden Smith, and going out and getting Eric Fisher, Ryan Kelly, first round pick that the current brass inherited. All of it just sort of matches up a very logical way that they built their team there. And, now you look at Jonathan Taylor in year 2, I think his value to the team is similar now, and it's at least trending that way, to the value of Derrick Henry in Tennessee, a guy where the identity of the team runs through the tailback. I think that's who Jonathan Taylor is becoming for the Indianapolis Colts.
And he's been as dominant as you can be from that position of late. Finally, Thanksgiving. Is Bears-Lions the least appetizing Thanksgiving thing you've ever seen?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, I like this one, you look at it, Tim Boyle, Andy Dalton. The one thing that I thought we were going to get here, Robin, the one thing that we could watch, and this isn't just because of that and that I'm an Ohio State guy, but getting the chance for the national audience to see Justin Fields, on that sort of stage, on the Thanksgiving stage. I mean, I thought that was going to be a great opportunity for everybody to get to watch an exciting young quarterback, and now he hurts his ribs, on Sunday against the Ravens, and we're not even going to get that, So the matchup itself, not the most appetizing matchup. But there are some storylines to follow here, and I think one of them, of course, is the Detroit Lions, still playing really hard for Dan Campbell. They're 0-9-1. Can they get off the schneid, like in a spot where traditionally the Lions have played really well? Normally, you've seen the Lions play a little bit over their head on Thanksgiving Day. And then, I think the obvious storylines there for the Bears, where there are a lot of people with a lot on the line there. They're 3-7 right now. They've got a young quarterback in the building, and the organization is going to have to make some big box decisions after this year. Question is, if they don't look good on Thursday, do some of those decisions wind up getting accelerated? And, this would be the spot where I think you might look at making some changes. This is actually the spot where the Lions made the change last year, moving off of Matt Patricia, because, if you're coming off of a Thursday game, you've got 10 days to reset yourself a little bit. And so if there are changes coming in season in Chicago, this would be the sort of spot where you'd have your radar up for it. So if they lose the Lions, maybe something like that happens. It's something, of course, that's never happened in the 101-year history of the Chicago Bears. Things are pretty bad there right now. I think it's something you at least got to have your eye open for.
Yeah, it could be a Black Friday for the loser of that game, and it would have nothing to do with any shopping deals they might get. Albert, appreciate the time, as always.
All right. Thanks, Robin.